once was giving a presentation, and it was an all-day presentation. A guy came up to me at break and said, "Very good so far." And I said, "So I have the rest of the day to screw it up. Is that about right?" He goes, "Yep." So
yeah, well, I've got a friend sitting in the audience that we grew up together. He said that's relative, growing up together, and he came up to me at the break, and he said, "You almost sounded like you knew what you're talking about." Almost.
So I was thinking about how to launch into this, and I just got my three. He talked about tough love, and she talked about based on stages of development. I just got my round about a year or so ago from these guys. And I got nailed. I got nailed on arrogance and critical and autocratic and stuff. And it actually took me back. It was like, and so when we look at this thing called reactive leadership, I actually see it with quite a lens of compassion, because I keep running into it in myself, right? And these patterns go deep. They go way deeper than I ever expected, actually. And so we tend to treat them lightly. We tend to treat them with skill. Let's do some training over top of it. And then the other thing we say is, well, this is me. Well, no, it's not me. This is how I'm not me. In it is a unique gift that I have, but I'm running it through a reactive structure, and that's actually limiting me from being me. And this is what we want to talk about. Let's put a developmental lens on this work. So how many of you have set a New Year's resolution and then set the same one the next year? Right? How many of you, like me, have done this? Yuck, need to fix that. Only to be back again a year later going, yuck, need to fix that, right? So just off the top, we're in a reactive structure when it's about fixing what we don't like. She talked about the manager there who's really good at fixing things. So we'll come back to that. How many of you have been a part of an organizational change process that ended up a year or two down the road didn't produce the results that you had intended, right? Yeah, about 80% of them do. We even call it flavor of the month. And so when we try to lead change from reactive mind, we actually end up back where we started. It's designed that way, and that's what we want to look at. Creative structure of mind, designed for very different outcomes. All right, are we into our deck here? Yeah, so
we are.
So these are two very different operating systems, and they get very different patterns of performance over time. They are different structures. Structure determines performance. The design of something determines its performance. You're perfectly designed for the performance you're getting. So here's the reactive operating, underlying structure reactive operating system. Focuses on what I don't want. Problem, threat, remove it. Out of some kind of inner conflict or fear. And we're good at what we do. We take action to solve the problem. But the underlying motive here is to get relief from the inner conflict. And that actually puts us in a play not to lose structure, whether we're aware of it or not. We're playing to reduce fear. Creative structure, very different. Focuses on what we care most about, driven from passion. Not that we don't have fears. When you're pursuing what you want most, you're often scared to death, but you're managing the fear. It's not managing you, and you're creating the futures that you aspire to. Very different structure. So I just want to talk about these. Story. And so if I go back and forth here, you say, well, if you listen to the story, what structure is this person in? So this goes back a few years. I'm called in by a life insurance salesman, one of the best in the world, to lead a session in his sales college. People come from all over the world to learn from him how to sell life insurance because he's one of the best going. In the United States, we have a thing called the $1 Million Roundtable. Are you familiar with that term, right? If you sell $1 million worth of life insurance, you make the $1 Million Roundtable. It's a real honor. Well, this guy makes the $1 Million Roundtable every year on the first business day of every year. a huge, just an amazing man. He's an early mentor of mine, brought me in to lead this session. And I actually talked about these two structures of mine. At the break, a guy comes up to me and goes, "You were talking about my life." And I go, "Yeah, I tried to do that." And he goes, no, really, can we talk? Can we have lunch? So I said, sure. So we sit down at lunch. Now, just listen to the story. It's almost verbatim. He said, which structure are we in? He says, "I got a problem." I said, "What's the problem?" He said, "I'm not learning anything here." I said, "What do you mean you're not learning anything here?" He said, "Well, I'm really good at selling life insurance. And I listen to John, and I know how to do all that stuff, and I'm really good at it, so I'm not learning anything here." I said, "Well, other than having spent a little money and a week of your life to be here, what's the problem?" And he said, "My results don't show it." "Tell me about your results." "Well, I look out at my results, and they're way off, and I know I can do better than that, and I get disgusted with myself, and I start to worry about putting food on the table, and I swing into gear, and I'm really good at it, so I swing into gear, and about 9 months later, cash flow is looking good, and I'm doing really well. So what's the problem?" 9 months later, back where I started, results are off, I get disgusted with myself, and I do it all over again. And that's been the pattern of my career. It hasn't gone anywhere like what I see with John. It just kind of leveled over time. Creative or reactive? Reactive. How much did he talk about this stuff? How much did he talk about this stuff? Never came up. All focused on this stuff, right? My clicker's slow here. So let's look at how this thing plays out over time. This is structure determines the pattern of performance over time. Got this work from Peter Senge. This is a systems dynamic analysis of the creative orientation, right? So he starts with a big problem, right? Which is low results. Big problem. As the problem gets bigger, what happens to his inner conflict, fear, right? What happens? Up or down? Up. So fear is going up. What happens then to his tendency to react to solve the problem? Up or down? Goes up. Great. And we assume that he's competent at what he does, so problem is actually getting less, right? Problem's going down. What's happening now to his fear? Up or down? Going down. So the fear is going down. What's happening to his tendency to continue reacting and taking action? Down. So then, as that goes down, then, of course, the problem comes back. And this is an oscillating cycle. It's actually designed to oscillate. It's like a thermostat. It's not a bad structure. It's actually a really useful structure for maintaining equilibrium. Thermostat keeps the room a certain temperature. Temperature goes up too high, blowers kick on. Temperature comes down, blowers kick off. And so the temperature is oscillating within certain acceptable parameters. This is the pattern of performance reactive mind. Look in the air, yuck. A year later, yuck again. Back to normal. So when we talk about flavor of the month, when we try to run change through reactive structure mind, back to normal. It's designed for that.
Well, you think about the change design that we're talking about here, 30 plus years in doing organizational development work. My second job inside corporate was I was in charge of organizational effectiveness for a large multinational. And we would design transformation efforts by using creative structure. So as a group of organizational development consultants, we would design these transformation efforts, and we would place our leaders into a container that held them in the creative structure. It worked, right? Magic took place. So these things happen inside these containers. We had, in those days, did a significant amount of work with Marv Weisbord and Sandra Janoff and Future Search Conferences, work that most in the room are familiar with here that came out of Tavistock, how to do large-scale engagement, get all the voices in the room. And magic took place. We take them out of that creative container that we were holding them in, and where did they go? Back to work. What's the container they're being held in at work? Reactive.
Yeah, and who's creating that container?
And it goes right back into normal. So we used to talk about sustaining change, sustained organizational change. If we can't have the creative transformation, the structural transformation, we can't sustain change. It doesn't sustain.
We talked about the canceling effect. So when we run our strength through a reactive structure of mind, we cancel it out. Here it is. Creative structure, very different. Purpose, passion, action. So as I get clear about what my vision, right? Get clear about my vision, what happens to my passion, up or down? Up, right? So passion goes up. What's happening to my... There it goes. What's happening? Okay, so it's what happens to the tendency to act? Up or down? Up, right? So action goes up. Purpose, as we get clear about the purpose or closer to it, what happens to my tendency to, my passion? Goes up, right? So in this cycle, everything keeps going up, 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 up. You get it? This is a virtuous cycle. It's a growth loop. It's designed to actually create futures. Doesn't that we don't have fear here? It just doesn't have us in the same way. Love and passion is superordinate to fear, and so we get very different patterns and results on this over time. Now, take that back. Let's go back to the salesman story. So I'm talking with this guy, and I pull out a napkin, and I draw on the napkin at the bottom of the thing. I say, look, we know what happens to you here. Right? You get disgusted with yourself and you swing into gear. So what happens to you here? And he did one of these. If you've ever mentored anybody, you know what this looks like. He goes. And I said, well...
Can you do that again?
Yeah. What just happened? And he goes, nothing, no, that wouldn't have anything to do with it. And I said, no, it came up when I asked you that question. What just happened? Oh, I wouldn't get... 3 times I asked him. Finally, he said, I thought of my dad in the church. I said, oh, really? What's your dad got to do with this? And he starts into an explanation, and his eyes go like this, you know. He says, my dad tried all his life to be successful and never was. You don't think I'd be worried about what my dad would think of me if I were more successful than he ever was, do you? I said, I don't know. How's it feel to you? He goes, I said, tell me about the church. He said, well, I've always been taught it's bad to have money. Now, I didn't argue theology with him here. That wasn't the point. But I said to him, so I pointed at the bottom here. I said, so let me see if I have this straight. Here, down at the bottom, you're a miserable excuse for a human being because you're not getting results. And at the top, your dad's going to hate you and you're going to hell. Is that about it? That's literally what I said to him. And he's like, this structure is actually designed or run by underlying beliefs and assumptions that by how we define ourselves. When I say that's not who I am, that's how I'm not who I am. When I'm running arrogance or autocratic, I've got a belief that's tied up with I have to be seen as the smartest guy in the room. My ideas define me. Not to have my ideas treated as relevant, that's like death to me. That's actually not true, but it feels true, right? And so underneath reactive structure, your dad's going to hate you and you're going to hell. And it's like, and it runs patterns. So this is designed, this structure is actually designed to create equilibrium between my current beliefs and assumptions and my current realities. Consciousness manifests, and it's designed to keep within normal parameters of my current belief systems. This one is designed to seek vision. And so the developmental move here is the capacity to take perspective, to see into my beliefs and assumptions that are running the reactive show, so I can manage them and they don't manage me. And as soon as I create that spaciousness, what opens up is, what would I do if I could? What do I really care about? Who am I really? What do I want now? That I'm not so limited by my need to be this or that. And that's the developmental move. And this is the structure that's built into the profile. So it's a stage of development model, and in the top half of the model, creative structure of mind, it gets very different patterns of performance over time. And we see that in the comments. You see a multiple effect on these creative competencies in the creative leaders and a canceling effect on the reactive leaders.
So you take this reactive structure of mind and the creative structure of mind and play it out, and we talked there for a moment about the internal beliefs and assumptions. And we all have them, right? But the key in these, for me, key that we look at is their internal beliefs and assumptions that are primarily hidden from our view. We can't necessarily see them. They're there, and we operate off of them, and as we talk about it, they have us versus us having them. So how we get underneath and understand those beliefs and assumptions that are running the game. Remember, we're talking about an internal operating system, and we're talking about an inside-outside game of leadership. How do we get underneath those assumptions and understand what they are so that we can look at those beliefs and assumptions and find out whether or not they're real? So one of our colleagues, Gail Young, talks about it. When she's operating the reactive, she doesn't feel seen. I actually feel like I have almost a fog in front of me, and you can see the image, but you can't really see me, because we put those out there as a way to maintain our identity and to protect ourselves and keep ourselves safe. So we work at this by talking about, on the bottom half of the leadership circle profile and the reactive structure of mind, we look at this by talking about the reactive character structure and the way we think about that. So getting the beliefs and assumptions in here allows us to get underneath and know where those came from and what they're about. And so often they're developed in very formative age. For me, as I play this one out, because this is very personal, developed, as I talked about a little earlier, really formative upbringing with a father who was way serious about wanting to teach lessons. And I didn't realize that's what he was serious about until I looked back at it in adulthood. I actually thought he was a fairly distant father. Loved the man completely, total respect for him, but really serious about teaching lessons. And so when we look at that and we think about it from a controlling perspective, 3 dimensions under here on this character structure: controlling, protecting, and complying, all of them pointed at identity, worth, and how we keep ourselves safe. So controlling, perfect, hard work, move up. Control, dictatorial, all about drive. This is will. This is will against will, strength against strength. And when you look at those comments and the liabilities, those thematic liabilities associated with each of those that came out of the research on the controlling, here's what showed up. Most controlling: ineffective interaction style, inattentive and poor listening, micromanages, over-demanding. So I take that controlling character structure, will, and out of that comes, on a liability standpoint, these areas.
So the beauty here of this is that will and the power for creating results is the core strength. It's a beautiful thing. It's a unique gift. Run through reactive structure of mind creates liabilities and outcomes that look more like this.
Well, and you saw it in Pietro, right? So all of a sudden Pietro's turning up that pressure, and these liabilities start to cancel out the gift. They take it off the table. You play this forward and you look at protecting, and we think about superior, smart, analytic, critical, distant. This is the big brain. This is head. We're talking about will up on controlling. We're talking about head here on protecting. And this one becomes, as all of this work is, it becomes really, really personal. So we talked about getting to that stage in our own development where we hit our level of development. What we've talked about in some cases, Peter Principle, raising my level of incompetence, hitting that level of development, and there's those stages when all of a sudden we realize we're outmatched by what's required, or it no longer works for us. So let's just go personal for a minute, which is, I'm sure you see with Bob and I, we don't have a tendency to do that often. We talk about leadership as spiritual boot camp. This is deep work. It It requires us to look at ourselves in a way that we may never have looked before. Roma taught me that when we're dealing with consciousness, it's about being aware and being awake. Am I aware and awake? I thought I was pretty self-aware. I'm not sure I was awake. So let's talk about protecting for a minute. Very firmly entrenched here on my protecting with my critical and arrogance. Now let's just play out arrogance for a moment. This is the mind of an arrogant critic. Let's play my critic. If you think what I say, what you actually hear from me, is a lot, you ought to hear what's going on underneath what I don't say. Because you're getting about 1% of my critical. Because if you got any more than 1%, I'd have no relationships. I'd be in my 4th marriage. Right? So arrogant and critical in combination as a core, now think about that as a strength. The critical on that as a strength is I'm able to see, I was reinforced for years by being able to see what others didn't see. I mean, quality improvement initiative, are you kidding me? I was part of the first TQM stuff. What did I see? I saw every possible error in the 2% that needed to be improved upon and completely ignored the 98 percentile. I was rewarded for that. Well, that works really, really well, and that situation, and then there's places where it runs up against its own developmental edge, and that happened one day with my son. So Chase, my oldest son, came home from his first year of law school, right? And we got a tight relationship. And he had been home about 15 minutes, came home from California, and we're sitting in the living room, and my critical's kicking up. About 6, 7 years ago. My critical's working me. And I'm being smart about my critical. I've held it for 15 minutes. I mean, come on, are you kidding? That's patience for a critic. And all of a sudden, out of my mouth comes the following words. Chase, you look like crap. Welcome home, son. And I very quickly learned that his education, studying law, was working for him. He'd had a good L1, good year. And he looked at me and he said, Dad, I don't appreciate that, really hurts me. I don't appreciate the edge. He said, but what I don't think you understand is I don't think you understand why I look like this. And I'm thinking, man, you look like you should be living under the viaduct on the freeway. I mean, seriously. Here's what I'm thinking. Check out the strength here. I'm thinking, if my son is going to get a job when he graduates from law school, he's got to learn how to dress the part. So I'm thinking, in my high critic that wants to take control and fix things, what? What am I going to do for him? Come on. We're going to go do what? We're going to go buy some new clothes. I started that out with Chase, you look like crap. So, Dad, I don't think you know why I look the way I do. And I said, I guess it's just not important to you. And he said, no, that's not it. I don't have any money. You told me, and you told all of the children, that you'd get us through undergraduate school. And if we decided to go to a professional degree or we wanted to get postgraduate work, we needed to figure out how to pay for that ourselves. I don't have any clothes because I don't have any money, and I don't want to ask you for any, Dad, because I'm doing that out of respect for you. I took you serious when you said we needed to do this on our own. And on top of that, Dad, I want to get really clear with you. You work way, way too hard. The last thing you need to do is support me at this stage of my career or my life and buy new clothes for me. I wouldn't ask you for that and take the money from you out of respect and love for you. Whoa. I just thought he looked like crap. Now, here's what happened. Underlying belief assumption. I thought the greatest value I had at a certain stage in my life in my own development was actually being that critic. And the value that I brought to that relationship was being able to point out to my children and others very, very close to me what they could improve upon without love and compassion and the respect that was required to treat them in dignity and understanding. I realized in that moment that what I thought was a core strength, the way I was showing up, not who I am, was no longer of any value. In one of the most important relationships in my life, what I thought was a core strength and core to my own identity had no value to one of the most important relationships I had. And it just went away.
Now I find myself when my critic starts to emerge, because I don't think you're sanctified by these beliefs and assumptions. I don't think they go away. I think that they're just there, and you can actually manage them, and you can be on top of them more quickly, and you can actually be a choice about them versus them being a choice for you. And it reframed the way I thought about life. So you play, whether it is complying, reactive, in here, protecting, or controlling. You play on all of these, and you look at it, and then you play yourself right back to leadership, because it's not just about leadership, it's about how we show up in our lives, period. Whether I'm a better husband, whether I'm a better father, whether I'm a better friend, whether I'm a better brother. And the liabilities most associated with the reactive on protecting in here, not a team player, aloof, not connected, ineffective, interaction style, over-demanding. Same thing we look at on the complying side, one of the three character structures, conventional, likable, acceptable, cautious, submissive. These are great people to be in relationship with. These are relationship-oriented people. This is heart. So we go will, head, heart. These are the heart folks. When it gets overused, this is what happens with those liabilities on complying. Self-centric, teams not held accountable, too focused on pleasing others. Those all show up. And what we find is that the place that these happen, where they start to play out, is on complying. As an example, we get the opposite effect on achieved results. Often we hear compliers saying to us, wow, no voice, I've lost my power. So the very strength can be turned into a liability when that gift is hung on a reactive structure.
And you cannot not do it. This is when a belief is running on autopilot, the insidiousness of it, because I'm identified with that strength, I have to be seen as the nice, likable, agreeable, supportive person. I have to be seen as the smart, wise, brilliant, analytical person. I have to be seen or experienced as the one who drives it through to results. Once I define, this makes me me. Not to be that is not to be. Feels like death. So we're now in a compulsive relationship with our own gift. We have to do that or else. And this is the underlying structure behind the overextension of a strength becomes a liability. I've heard that forever. But what's underneath, why and how that continues to be overplayed, and we don't notice it. Because it has us, we don't have it.
So we play ourselves right back into this understanding about the canceling effect and those gifts being offset by the liabilities. And the last thing I ever believed at that stage in my life was that I'd actually have that canceling effect not just happening to me at work, but happening to me at home. My younger son, on the canceling effect, Tyson, and figure this one out, folks. We thought we trained him better than that. He's going to work for PricewaterhouseCoopers in about 60 days, and he's going to be an HR consultant in the Leadership and Change Group. We actually thought, are you kidding me? This is therapy moments for his kids too, not just ours. And he looked at me one day, and he stood up, and he said, well, and then we got into a little bit of a tiff. My controlling came out. And he looked at me and says, well, the question I have, you about 18, 17, question I have for you is, do you want me to tell you what I believe and think, or what you want to hear? Out of the mouth of babes, right? So what was showing up in that relationship, in that liability, was taking that gift off the table where he could actually have been receiving good advice from his dad. So these not only work us, we have to work them in a way that we can get underneath them and understand what they are and how they control us.
So let's turn to complying. Focus here. We're just going to bring this home really quickly. When you run your gift through a reactive structure, you take it off the table. And you introduce competing liabilities. So here's Ed. Ed, as an example of a complying leader in the feedback. Ed needs to stop worrying about what other people think. Focus on team improvement and results, and let the opinions fall where they may. He needs to take better care of those who take care of him. His management style needs to flow both ways. Ed should stop being wishy-washy with his decisions. Ed should stand behind his employees rather than blame them for decisions. Ed should spend more time developing his people. His direct reports are not seen as strong managers.
Ed should operate in a manner that allows his performance to speak for itself rather than reminding everyone of all the things he's done. He needs to take a stand on his business position, feelings, and support them with facts. He shouldn't change positions to please others when controversy happens. Many of his employees and peers believe that he's more of a yes man than a person who actually commit to making things change for the better.
And so, complying, this is an example of complying. Run on autopilot, right? Gifts are people gifts. Core gift, core strength here, heart, right? So we see compliers, strong people skills, approachable, boy, that got off there. Team builder, empowers people, so on, right? Those are the core kinds of strengths, people strengths. Here's the gift removed. These are the liabilities that show up for complying, right? Not team development, team not held accountable, overly pleasing, negative, right? Remove the gifts. Look at the numbers, 84 to 93.
And all of a sudden you move to the competing liabilities, so 84 to 93, and then we've got the competing liabilities. Vision not articulated, indecisive, and works too hard. So all of a sudden you start to see that canceling effect play it out where you end up then in a net loss versus a gain. Again, the same thing. Now look at the limits through the lens of a verbatim on a controlling leader. John is very passionate about the success of our company, but he sometimes lets his passion get the better of him. He pushes others too hard and demands more than they can deliver.
Joe is very direct, and this is great. However, when yielded without compassion or empathy, it becomes intimidating. 3 exclamation points.
Look at these reactive structure and the gifts on the controlling. Those gifts are, again, strong, driving passion, visionary, results-focused, courageous, assertive, and then they're removed when they're hung on a reactive structure.
When we have to be this way or else, we overuse them. We use them with an edge, and this is what results, and that actually removes the gift. So you got a total of 186 to 201. And then you introduce the competing liabilities. These are on the opposite side. These are the people side. So the profile's built around these tensions. Controlling here, relating there. The competing liabilities show up here, right? So you got ineffective interaction style, not a team player, inattentive, poor listener, too self-centered, lacks emotional control, inflexible, and so on. And not only does it cancel itself out, it actually introduces competing liability.
Strengths run on a reactive structure of mind. Again, we're maintaining current reality. We're coming back. We're removing the core gift. We're introducing those competing liabilities, and those competing liabilities can be significant. It's a neither nor. A neither nor, and there's high costs associated with it. The question mark is, what's the cost in energy? What's the discretionary energy cost and loss in here?
So what actually got me into 360 in the first place, years ago, using them, which I didn't for mostly 20 years, was watching really passionate, visionary leaders step all over their change efforts. Right? Like, wow, look at this. So when you're trying to lead change from a reactive mindset and you don't know you're in one, it's going back to normal. It's designed that way. And you're canceling yourself out with competing liabilities in ways you don't even see. And at higher levels, nobody will tell you. It's not a complex enough operating system in which to lead, because I've actually formed my beliefs and assumptions in the current context. They've formed me. Therefore, to lead is to step beyond the current context, and my beliefs and assumptions actually aren't organized to do that. So I go into fear, we go back to normal. I run some reactive routine that actually keeps it at normal, even though my intention is to change.
Well, and one of the keys in here when we talk about this and we work our way into the structure on a creative mind and think about the two in reactive and creative is that on the lighter side of this is just human. And how is it that we actually give ourselves and others the kind of grace that they need and deserve? Because it can become pretty difficult to deal with, right? So I have to hold this stuff lightly. I have to crack myself up. Like, seriously, I fell right back into that reactive structure again. And am I funny or what? I mean, that's really the holding it with grace so that we can actually look at ourselves in our own development process and understand that shift between the reactive and creative and moving into integral is a developmental path. And we have to pass through one to get to the other. You can't skip one. And it is part of the process. So understanding and being able to take perspective makes all the difference. On the structure here, on the strength structure, we look at the structure of mind on creative, 6 vision, gets a multiple on strengths, leverages complementary competencies, and it's not an either nor. It's a both and. It's a both and.
You can see that in this comment. Jerry's the kind of leader who challenges and motivates you to do your best. You feel comfortable stretching because you know he won't second guess a judgment call. If he disagrees after the fact, he will turn that into a learning opportunity rather than offer unproductive criticism. So you hear the ability to challenge and support in combination. And so this is what we mean by you get your strength in multiple and you get the complementary competency. And so in the here we go. You get strong people skills and drive and passion. They don't compete, they complement. You get a focus on vision and team building, which, as we've said, are the combination of the two most highly correlated to leadership effectiveness. You get a results focus, hard focus on results, and you do that in a way that develops and empowers people. You get you can have your technical brilliance and domain capability and be approachable and personable and so on. So you get your strength in multiple and you get the competency that complements it. That's just the way it works. And then, of course, we can fill in the top half of the circle with the kinds of things like leads by example, person of integrity, can be open and honest and forthright and direct, and do that in a calm demeanor, and so on. And so we wrote the book, we titled it Mastering Leadership. And Mastering Leadership, as we now understand it from this analysis, is the operating system allows fluid movement between strengths, so we can actually bring the right strength to the situation, to complex, highly charged situations. And we're not stuck in a default of running our leadership through a reactive default setting.
We get out of the neither nor into the both and. And the opportunity in here, going right back to the beginning, is that adults, if they choose, can develop. Leaders, if they choose, can develop. And how is it that I can get better results, be more agile, be more flexible with less energetic cost? The difference between the reactive and creative, that 0.9 to that multiple and ratio in my work. Let's take a look at a leader just very quickly that made a decision to do this very briefly. This is called this case study, the Leadership Challenge at Honda. Honda's been a client of ours for about 5 years. We've worked with them across the globe. Now San, who is going to be talking to us next, and I've done work with them in Japan as well as pretty much everywhere in the world. Honda made a decision 5 years ago because of the emerging economies where they were getting stretched in scale that they no longer could depend on leadership all being sourced out of Japan everywhere in the world for each of those regions. So where they've been manufacturing, as an example, inside the United States for 33, 34 years, they decided, hey, we've got to develop local leadership. We have to develop local leadership. We can't afford any longer to have Japanese leaders. We don't have them, capacity-wise, or the needed capability in every part of the world to do that. Therefore, we've got to move to a developmental agenda. That was being primarily driven because of what was happening in the emerging economies in China and India. So they took on this developmental agenda with their leaders. This is Mike Jett. He's vice president of a hardcore manufacturing plant down on the Georgia-Alabama border. It's called Honda Precision Parts. 250,000 square foot transmission manufacturing facility. 100 million facility supports production of Honda vehicles. They're a just-in-time plant. If they don't get out what they produce, the cars don't get manufactured. That's Mike's profile. Mike's a case study in the book. I had the pleasure of working with Mike in 2012 and doing the debrief on this profile. And he's one of the best manufacturing plant managers I've ever run into. He runs a great show. He runs a great show. Well, Mike got his profile and wasn't happy with his results. When you look at Mike and you say, wow, somewhere around the 20th percentile on the reactive creative there on the left, pretty darn strong. But what else do you notice about Mike? He'd be the first to tell you this, just give us permission to talk about him. I'm thinking he's probably watching us, so we can all say hi to Mike. What do you see about him? Yeah? What do you see up here? His self-scores are what?
Much higher.
Wow, check this out. So all of a sudden on the reactive side, Mike rates himself much lower than everybody else rates him. On the creative side, he has a tendency to be a little bit closer, but still a difference. What do we call that? Blind spots, right? This is filled with blind spots. And so Mike decided that he was going to get really serious about developing himself and put himself into that process in a leadership system, development system in Honda. Looked something like this. It went through a year's worth of work. He took that work in place. He took Leadership Circle Profile. He got deep into it. And then he decided he was going to turn this into his development agenda for his entire organization and all of his people. 2 years later, Mike comes back, 2012, and this is what it looked like in 2014. 2012 and 2014. He wrote me an email, attached this profile. Bill, this stuff actually works. Couldn't be happier. I wish I had have known about this 25 to 30 years ago. 25 to 30 years ago. I don't know why 25 to 30. LQ score, 0.39. 2014, 1.2. It's not only hit competitive, he's a little bit above. His leadership is now a competitive advantage. He has taken the entire thing on. He's now developed all his own people. Mike now considers himself the primary development officer of that manufacturing plant. If you're a leader that works for Mike, you are in a developmental process. He's adopted the developmental agenda, and he sees himself as the person leading that. We keep getting our stuff back from Mike, right? And we see it repackaged in a whole new way that he's applied directly to his own people. Then we said, well, let's take a look in his strengths, on the thematic strengths. Just understand this based on the research we just did. These are from Mike's open-ended comments. Mike hasn't seen this yet. This is
Here you go, Mike.
Debrief.
Take a look. We did the math.
He's warned, but he hasn't seen it yet. 2012, 2014. Total score on thematic strengths, 8 in 12 and 10.5 in 2014. But that wasn't the story, right?
Still a big story. It's like a
Big
30%
story.
move, right?
Yeah,
So,
big story. 2012, check that out. Liabilities, 5.5. Now think about this as a leader. 2012, thematic liabilities, 5.5. In 2014, 2. And look what didn't show up. And one person out of his leadership team that said, I can't challenge it. I wouldn't have anything in there that would say Mike isn't the kind of leader that I would absolutely like to pattern myself around every day. Play it out a little bit further. 8 strengths in 2012, 5.5 liabilities, and all of a sudden 2014, 10.5 strengths. Liabilities have gone down by over double. On the simplest level, net strengths, 2012, 2 to 2014, 5.5. And a transformed leader. And here's the results. Productivity, 8% points, 88 to 96. The incidence of safety, not a really pretty baseline human measure here, dropped from 9 to 0.5, the lowest in the company at Honda, the very lowest in the company. So all of a sudden Honda saying, man, what are you doing, Mike? Well, I can't tell you I'm doing anything different other than I'm a more effective leader than I was 2 years ago. I can't tell you that's where the direct impact came from, but I can tell you that's the only thing I'm doing differently. Quality of the customer complaint measures went from 90 to 19, setting the company an industry record. Employee retention attrition went from 17%, meaning they were losing 17% of their manpower annually, to 6% and moving towards their goal. And so here's what we know. When we look at a whole picture of what we shared with you today, we fully understand that and believe that the adoption of the developmental agenda is a business imperative. It's not just about it being the right thing to do. Adults can develop if they choose. Leaders can develop if they choose. It's the right thing to do for the business for results. It's a combination of both. And we believe that it's one of those things that's going to make a significant difference in the world where we need some help today.
And it's a business imperative, more and more. It's a global imperative. I want to close with a poem by Rilke. It's called The Swan. And we all have these reactive, kind of intractable reactive layers in us. And we also have incredible grace and beauty and greatness. This poem captures it. It says, "This clumsy living, which move lumbering as if in ropes through what is not done." Isn't that great? I mean, wouldn't you like to be able to describe your own reactive side as this clumsy living, which moves lumbering as if in ropes through what is not done, reminds us of the awkward way the swan walks. And to die, which is a letting go of the ground we stand on and cling to every day, is like the swan when she nervously lets herself down into the water, which receives her gaily and flows under and after her wave after wave, while the swan, unmoving and marvelously calm, is pleased to be carried. Each minute more fully grown, more like a queen composed, farther and farther on. This is hard work, and it is a death-resurrection process. And the place we would fall is the place we are held. But we don't know that. This clumsy living which moves lumbering as if in ropes through what is not done reminds us, this is the compassionate line, reminds us of the awkward way the swan walks. And to die, which is letting go of the ground we stand on and cling to every day, is like the swan when she nervously lets herself down into the water, which receives her gaily and flows under and after her, wave after wave, while the swan, unmoving and marvelously calm, is pleased to be carried. Each minute more fully grown, more like a queen composed, farther and farther on.
We so much appreciate the opportunity of being able to share with you today, and we're in a position as a world now that great leadership is required, and authentic, transparent, full of integrity. Faith, mentor-based mentor and leader of mine one day, when I said, "What can I do?" he looked at me and he said, "Bill, just lift where you stand. Just lift where you stand." Thank you.